I am Anna Markle, 29 years old, and until 3 weeks ago I was the golden daughter who never said no. Then my family demanded I sacrifice my dream job offer to stay home and care for my chronically ill brother while they pursued their own ambitions. When I finally refused, their words shattered everything I thought I knew about love. How selfish can you be, Anna? Family comes first, always. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply packed my bags and disappeared. This morning I found 8 missed calls and a dozen desperate text messages waiting on my phone. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between your dreams and your family's expectations? My story might show you why sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Growing up in the picturesque suburbs of Westfield, Massachusetts, I learned early that being the eldest daughter in the Markle family meant one thing. Perfection was not optional, it was expected. Our colonial-style house with its white picket fence and manicured lawn looked like something from a magazine, and my parents, Margaret and Richard Markle, expected their children to match that pristine image. My father worked as a senior partner at a prestigious law firm in Boston, commuting an hour each way to maintain our upper-middle-class lifestyle. My mother, a former teacher who had given up her career to raise us, channeled all her professional ambitions into managing our family like a well-oiled machine. Every detail of our lives was orchestrated to reflect success and respectability. "Anna, you represent our family wherever you go," became the soundtrack of my childhood, starting when I was just 6 years old and my younger brother Marcus was 3. While other kids my age were allowed to get dirty playing in sandboxes or have messy birthday parties, I was expected to maintain perfect posture, speak articulately, and never, ever embarrass the family name. The difference between Marcus and me was evident from our earliest years, though it would take me decades to fully understand its impact. When Marcus struggled with reading in 1st grade, my parents hired expensive tutors and specialists, rearranging their schedules to accommodate his needs. When I expressed interest in art classes at age 7, I was told that such activities were fine as hobbies, but academic excellence was what mattered for my future. Our bedrooms told the story without words. Mine was designed like a miniature executive office, a large desk, organized bookshelves, and educational posters covering the walls. My parents insisted this environment would foster my intellectual development. Marcus's room, meanwhile, was a wonderland of toys, games, and colorful decorations that my mother refreshed seasonally to stimulate his creativity and keep him engaged. When I asked why Marcus got to have fun decorations while mine looked like a library, my mother's response became a familiar refrain. "You're different from Marcus, sweetheart. You're naturally gifted and disciplined. He needs more encouragement and support to reach his potential." By elementary school, the patterns were deeply established. I maintained straight A's not because I was naturally brilliant, but because anything less than perfection resulted in disappointed sighs and lectures about wasted potential. Marcus, meanwhile, was celebrated for C's and praised effusively for any small improvement. Why does Marcus get ice cream for bringing home a B when I got in trouble for my first A last month? I asked my father one evening during 4th grade. He barely looked up from his legal briefs. "Because Marcus has to work harder for his grades, Anna. Success comes easily to you, so we expect more. That's how the world works. The more capable you are, the more responsibility you carry." This philosophy shaped every aspect of our childhood. When Marcus was diagnosed with mild ADHD at age 8, our entire family dynamic shifted to accommodate his needs. Dinner conversations revolved around his struggles and achievements. Family vacations were planned around activities that would help him burn energy and stay focused. Even my birthday parties became subdued affairs because too much excitement might overstimulate my brother. I began to understand that my role in the family wasn't just to excel, it was to excel quietly, without needing attention or support, so that all available emotional and financial resources could be directed toward Marcus. High school intensified these dynamics. While I juggled advanced placement courses, debate team, volunteer work, and a part-time job to save for college, Marcus received unlimited support for his various interests. When he wanted to try lacrosse, my parents bought him professional-grade equipment and hired a private coach. When I made varsity debate team, they congratulated me briefly before launching into concerns about how my tournament schedule might affect my ability to help Marcus with his homework. The summer before my senior year remains particularly vivid. I had been accepted to a competitive internship at a Boston nonprofit focused on educational equity, an opportunity that aligned perfectly with my college and career goals. 3 days before the internship was set to begin, Marcus was enrolled in an expensive summer program for teens with learning differences. The program required extensive family involvement, including daily pickups and intensive therapy sessions. "I know you were looking forward to your internship," my mother said, not meeting my eyes, "but Marcus really needs our support right now. This program could be life-changing for him. You can find other internships next year." "But this internship is specifically for rising seniors," I protested. "There won't be a next year for this opportunity." "Anna, please don't be dramatic," my father interjected. "You'll have plenty of opportunities in college. Your brother might not get another chance like this." I gave up the internship. Not because I agreed with their reasoning, but because I had learned that fighting for my own needs was labeled as selfishness, while sacrificing for Marcus was proof of good character. The college application process crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. Despite maintaining a 4.0 GPA, scoring in the 99th percentile on standardized tests, and accumulating an impressive list of extracurricular achievements, my parents directed me toward practical choices close to home. "Harvard is too far away and too expensive," my father declared when I received an acceptance letter with a partial scholarship. "You can get just as good an education at UMass Amherst for a fraction of the cost. Plus, you'll be close enough to help with Marcus during his difficult high school years." Meanwhile, they were already discussing sending Marcus to expensive private schools and specialized programs, regardless of cost or location, if it might help him reach his full potential. "But Dad, Harvard was your dream school when you were my age," I reminded him during one particularly heated discussion. "You've always said education is the best investment." "That was different," he replied. "I was supporting myself. You have family responsibilities to consider. Marcus needs stability and support during these crucial years." The irony was crushing. My achievements, which should have opened doors, instead became reasons why I needed fewer opportunities. Because I was capable and self-sufficient, I required less investment. Because Marcus struggled, he deserved unlimited support. I chose UMass Amherst with a full academic scholarship, telling myself it was a practical decision. Deep down, I knew I was choosing the path that would allow me to remain available for whatever family crisis might arise next. College should have been my escape, my chance to discover who I was beyond my family's expectations. Instead, it became 4 years of managing my education around Marcus's needs. Every time he struggled with a class, had a social conflict, or faced a new challenge, I received calls demanding I come home to help. My parents insisted that my support was crucial for his development and that I was the only one who could really understand and motivate him. "Anna has such a gift for explaining things in ways Marcus can understand," my mother would tell relatives, as if my ability to help my brother was my most valuable trait rather than my own academic achievements or personal qualities. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in social work and nonprofit management, but my parents' response was notably muted. "We're proud of you, of course," my mother said at my graduation dinner, "but we're more relieved that you'll be coming home to help Marcus transition to college. He's so anxious about leaving for school, and you're the only one who can really calm him down." I had been offered a position with Teach for America that would have placed me in an underserved school district in North Carolina, exactly the kind of meaningful work I had dreamed of doing. Instead, I turned it down to move back home and help Marcus prepare for college while I worked at a local nonprofit for a fraction of the salary I could have earned elsewhere. "You're making such a sacrifice for your brother," well-meaning family friends would say. "He's so lucky to have such a devoted sister." But it didn't feel like devotion. It felt like drowning in expectations I had never chosen, in a role I had never auditioned for, in a family where my worth was measured entirely by my utility to others. The 3 years after college were a carefully choreographed dance of supporting Marcus through his university struggles while trying to build my own career with whatever energy remained. When he called crying because he was failing calculus, I spent my weekends driving 2 hours to his campus to tutor him. When he had roommate conflicts, I became his mediator and emotional support system. When he wanted to change majors for the 3rd time, I researched programs and helped him navigate the bureaucracy. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks at New England Family Services, a nonprofit focused on supporting families in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days helping other families establish healthy boundaries and communication patterns while enabling the exact dysfunctions in my own family that I counseled clients to avoid. "You give excellent advice about family dynamics," observed Dr. Sarah Chen, my supervisor and mentor. "Have you ever considered applying those principles to your own situation?" "It's different when it's your own family," I deflected, though her question haunted me. "Marcus really does need extra support. He's dealing with learning differences and anxiety." "And what are you dealing with?" she asked gently. "When was the last time someone in your family asked about your needs, your stress, your future goals?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. By age 26, I had saved enough money to move into my own apartment, a small one-bedroom place in Springfield, 30 minutes from my parents but far enough to feel like independence. The space was modest but entirely mine, bookshelves filled with social work journals and literature, plants I could nurture without anyone criticizing my choices, and most importantly, a home office where I could work on my master's degree in clinical social work. "Why are you wasting money on rent when you could save by living at home?" my father asked when I announced my move. "And how will this affect your availability to help Marcus? He's struggling with his senior year and graduation is approaching." "I need my own space to focus on my graduate studies," I explained, though the real reason was more complex. I was suffocating under the constant expectation to be available for every family crisis, real or imagined. My apartment became my sanctuary. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to come home without immediately being updated on Marcus's latest struggles or being asked to solve someone else's problems. I could study without interruption, read for pleasure, and even have friends over without my mother analyzing every detail of their character and background. But the respite was temporary. Marcus's senior year of college brought a cascade of new crises. He was struggling to complete his thesis, anxious about job prospects, and having relationship problems with his girlfriend. Each issue triggered urgent family meetings and demands for my intervention. "Anna, you have to talk to him," my mother pleaded during one of many crisis calls. "He won't listen to us, but he trusts you. You're the only one who can get through to him." I found myself spending most weekends at my parents' house, providing therapy services I should have been charging for to a brother who had learned to see me as a resource rather than a person. The worst part was that my help wasn't just requested, it was expected, assumed, demanded as proof of my love and family loyalty. "I don't understand why you're being so distant lately," Marcus said during one of our forced heart-to-heart conversations. "You used to always be there for me. Now it feels like you don't care about my problems." "I do care," I said carefully, "but I also have my own life, my own goals, my own stress to manage." He looked genuinely confused. "But you're so good at handling everything. It's not like you really struggle with anything the way I do." That conversation crystallized something I had been avoiding for years. My family genuinely believed that because I appeared competent and self-sufficient, I didn't experience real problems, stress, or emotional needs. My struggles were invisible because I had learned to manage them independently. My achievements were dismissed as effortless because I had never been allowed to show the effort they required. Meanwhile, my career was flourishing despite the family distractions. I completed my master's degree with a 3.9 GPA while working full-time, and my thesis on family boundary dysfunction was published in a respected social work journal. Dr. Chen recommended me for a position with the National Center for Family Excellence in Washington, D.C., a dream job that would allow me to influence policy and practice on a national level. "This is an incredible opportunity," Dr. Chen told me as we reviewed the job description. They're specifically looking for someone with your combination of clinical experience and research background. The salary would be double what you're making here, and the potential for impact is enormous. It's in DC, I said, though my heart was racing with excitement at the possibility. So, my family needs me here. Marcus is job hunting and struggling with the transition to adult life. My parents are getting older and might need more support soon. Dr. Chen studied my face carefully. Anna, can I ask you something? When you counsel families about enmeshment and codependency, what do you tell them? That healthy families support individual growth and independence, I recited automatically. And what does your family do? The question hit like a physical blow because the answer was so obvious. My family punished independence and rewarded dependency. They had trained me to believe that my worth was contingent on my availability to solve their problems and that my dreams were selfish luxuries that took away from family obligations. I need to think about it, I told Dr. Chen, though I had already mentally composed the email declining the opportunity. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house for what I told myself would be a casual visit. Instead, I found myself in the middle of another Marcus crisis. He had been rejected from 3 graduate programs and was spiraling into depression and anxiety. Anna, thank goodness you're here, my mother said, greeting me at the door with barely contained panic. Marcus hasn't left his room in 2 days. Your father tried to talk to him, but you know how he shuts down with men. We need you to work your magic. Work my magic. As if my ability to communicate with my brother was some kind of supernatural gift rather than a skill I had developed through years of forced practice and emotional labor. I spent the afternoon listening to Marcus express fears about his future, helping him develop a plan for alternative career paths, and essentially providing the kind of therapeutic support that people paid professionals to receive. By evening, he was calmer and ready to rejoin the family for dinner. See? My mother said triumphantly. Nobody can reach him the way you can. What would we do without you? That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling and finally confronted the truth I had been avoiding. I was 27 years old, highly educated, professionally successful, and completely trapped in a family dynamic that would prevent me from ever fully becoming myself. The National Center job would require me to start in 6 weeks. If I was going to take it, I needed to decide immediately. I spent the next week researching apartments in DC, calculating moving costs, and imagining what my life might look like if I prioritized my own goals for once. The excitement was intoxicating, but it was accompanied by crushing guilt. How could I abandon my family when they needed me? What kind of daughter chooses career advancement over family loyalty? The decision was made for me the following Sunday. I arrived at my parents' house to find them in the living room with Marcus, surrounded by graduate school brochures and applications. Anna, perfect timing, my father said. We've been researching master's programs for Marcus, and we think he should apply for next fall. But he's going to need a lot of support with the application process and probably tutoring to bring up his GRE scores. That sounds like a great plan, I said carefully. There are some excellent test prep programs available. We were thinking you could work with him, my mother continued. You know his learning style better than anyone, and you've been through graduate school yourself. Plus, it would be so much more affordable than hiring professional tutors. And once he gets accepted, my father added, it would be helpful if you could be available during his first year. You know how he struggles with transitions. I felt the familiar weight of expectation settling over me like a heavy blanket. Actually, I've been offered a position in Washington, D.C. It's an incredible opportunity with the National Center for Family Excellence. The room fell silent. My parents exchanged glances that conveyed entire conversations about my selfishness and poor timing. Washington? My mother said finally. But that's so far away. And what about Marcus? This is such a crucial time for him. Anna, you can't be serious, Marcus said, his voice rising with anxiety. You know I can't handle this stuff without you. You're the only person who really understands how my brain works. Marcus is 22, I said gently. He's capable of much more than you all give him credit for. Maybe it's time to let him discover that. That's easy for you to say, my father interjected. You don't understand the challenges he faces. You've always had everything come naturally. Nothing has come naturally to me, I said, feeling years of frustration bubbling to the surface. I've worked incredibly hard for everything I've achieved, often while managing Marcus's crises and family emergencies. The difference is that I've never been allowed to show that effort or ask for support. Supporting family isn't supposed to be transactional, my mother said coldly. We've given you everything: education, opportunities, love. Now when we need something in return, you want to run away to chase some career fantasy. Career fantasy? I repeated, incredulous. This is the kind of position you would have celebrated if I were a son instead of a daughter. If I were Marcus, you would be helping me pack and bragging to the neighbors about my success. That's completely different, my father said dismissively. Marcus has special needs. You have special gifts. People like you have obligations to use those gifts in service of others. People like me? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. People like me, women, daughters, caregivers, were expected to sacrifice our dreams for the greater good of the family. Marcus looked directly at me with the wounded expression he had perfected over the years. I can't believe you would abandon me when I need you most. I thought we were closer than that. I'm not abandoning you, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm trying to live my own life. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting, he replied. If you really cared about this family, you would find a way to make it work. Maybe you could take the job but come home every weekend, or negotiate to work remotely part of the time. The expectation was breathtaking in its audacity. Even my dream job should be modified to accommodate my brother's emotional needs and my parents' desire to keep me geographically and emotionally available. I need to think about this, I said finally, gathering my purse to leave. There's nothing to think about, my mother said firmly. Family comes first, Anna. It always has and it always will. If you take this job, you're telling us that your career matters more than the people who love you. I drove home in tears, not because I was sad, but because I was finally completely furious. For 27 years, I had been told that my worth was measured by my usefulness to others. My dreams were selfish. My needs were secondary. My achievements were expected rather than celebrated because I was naturally gifted and therefore required less support and recognition. That night, I called Dr. Chen and accepted the position in Washington. Then I began planning the most difficult conversation of my life. 2 weeks later, I sat across from my family in their pristine living room and delivered news that would shatter our carefully maintained facade of harmony. I've accepted the position with the National Center for Family Excellence. I start in 4 weeks and I'll be moving to DC next weekend. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went pale, my father's jaw tightened, and Marcus looked as if I had physically struck him. You've already accepted? My father asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Without discussing it with us? I'm 27 years old, I replied calmly. I don't need permission to make career decisions. But you need our support to make good decisions, my mother countered. And this is not a good decision, Anna. You're destroying this family for a job that will probably last 2 years before you get laid off or burned out. Even if that were true, it would still be my choice to make. Marcus stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger and hurt. Fine. Go. But don't expect me to pretend everything is okay when you come crawling back after you realize that strangers don't care about you the way your family does. Marcus, I began. No, he interrupted. You want to be selfish? Be selfish. But don't pretend you're doing this for good reasons. You're doing it because you've always resented helping me, and now you finally have an excuse to stop. The accusation was so unfair, so completely disconnected from reality that I actually laughed. Marcus, I have spent my entire adult life organizing my decisions around your needs. I turned down college opportunities, job offers, and social relationships because this family convinced me that your well-being was more important than my own development. If anything, I've been too selfless, not too selfish. That's ridiculous, my father interjected. Nobody forced you to make those choices. You made them because you're a good person who cares about family. Now you're trying to rewrite history to justify abandoning us. I'm not rewriting anything, I said, feeling exhausted by the familiar patterns of gaslighting and guilt manipulation. I'm finally telling the truth. This family has operated on the assumption that my dreams and needs are less important than Marcus's because I appear more capable and self-sufficient. But capability doesn't mean I don't have feelings, goals, or the right to make my own choices. My mother began to cry, not the genuine tears of hurt, but the calculated tears designed to make me feel guilty for causing emotional pain. How did we raise such a selfish daughter? We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. You gave me conditional love, I replied, surprised by my own clarity. Love that was contingent on my usefulness and availability. That's not a gift, it's a transaction. That's the most ungrateful thing I've ever heard, my father said, standing up to pace. We sacrificed for you, invested in your education, supported your goals when it was practical. Now when we need something in return, you call it conditional love. When did you support my goals? I asked genuinely. When did you encourage me to take risks, pursue opportunities, or prioritize my own development? Every time I wanted something that didn't align with family needs, I was told to be practical, to think of others, to remember my responsibilities. Because that's what adults do, my mother said through her tears. They consider how their choices affect the people they love. Only when it's convenient, I said. When Marcus wanted to go to expensive summer camps, nobody worried about the financial impact on the family. When he changed majors 3 times, nobody suggested he consider practical alternatives. When he needed tutoring, therapy, or special accommodations, money and time were found without question. But when I need support or want to pursue opportunities, suddenly I need to think about family obligations. The room fell silent again, and I could see in their faces that they were finally hearing what I had been trying to communicate for years. But instead of acknowledgement or apology, I saw defensiveness and justification. Marcus has special needs, my mother said finally. He requires more support. You've always been independent and capable. Because I was forced to be, I replied. Because showing need or vulnerability was treated as weakness, while Marcus's struggles were treated with compassion and accommodation. You created the dynamic you're now using to justify it. Marcus, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly exploded. This is insane. You're acting like we abused you or something. We loved you, supported you, celebrated your achievements. Now you're making us sound like monsters because we asked for help during difficult times. You didn't ask for help, I corrected. You demanded sacrifice as proof of love. There's a difference between helping during genuine emergencies and organizing your entire life around someone else's emotional comfort. So that's it? My father asked. You're just going to abandon everything and everyone who matters to chase some career in a city where you know nobody? I'm going to try living as myself for the first time in my adult life, I said quietly. I'm going to discover who I am when I'm not defined entirely by my usefulness to others. Well, congratulations, Marcus said bitterly. I hope your newfound independence keeps you warm at night when you realize you've thrown away the only people who actually love you. I stood up to leave, feeling lighter despite the emotional devastation surrounding me. If your love for me is contingent on my sacrificing my dreams and future, then it's not actually love. It's ownership. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Nobody followed me to the door. Nobody called after me as I walked to my car. The silence spoke volumes about how conditional their love had always been. As I drove away from the house where I had spent my childhood learning to minimize myself for others' comfort, I felt something I had never experienced before, the exhilarating terror of complete freedom. 3 weeks later, I was settled into a small apartment in DuPont Circle, starting my new position and discovering what it felt like to live without the constant weight of family crisis and emotional labor. My days were filled with meaningful work, my evenings with exploration of a new city, and my weekends with activities I chose based on my own interests rather than family obligations. The silence from Massachusetts was deafening. No calls checking on my adjustment, no messages asking about my new job, no expressions of interest in my life. Their absence confirmed what I had suspected. I had been valued for what I provided, not who I was. Until this morning, when I turned on my phone after a peaceful weekend hiking in Shenandoah National Park to find 8 missed calls and 12 text messages, all from family members. The crisis, according to the increasingly frantic messages, was that Marcus had been diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety following a breakdown at his new job. He was refusing treatment, isolating himself in his room, and apparently asking for me repeatedly. "Anna, please call us immediately." My mother's voice was desperate in the final voicemail. "Marcus won't eat, won't shower, won't talk to anyone. He keeps saying he needs his sister. The doctors think you might be the key to getting him into treatment. Please, we're begging you. We need you to come home." As I listened to their pleas, I felt the familiar tug of obligation and guilt. Part of me wanted to book an immediate flight, rush home, and fix whatever I could fix. The caretaker in me, carefully cultivated over decades, whispered that this was different, that this was a real emergency where my help was truly needed. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger during these 3 weeks of independence, recognized the pattern. Marcus was in crisis, therefore Anna must sacrifice her life to provide rescue. The fact that he had refused professional treatment while demanding my presence was particularly telling. He wanted my emotional labor, not actual help. I found myself at a crossroads that would define not just my relationship with my family, but my relationship with myself. I could return to Massachusetts, resume my role as family crisis manager, and likely lose the job and independence I had fought so hard to achieve. Or I could maintain the boundaries I had established and trust that my family was capable of handling this crisis without me. The choice would reveal whether I had truly changed or if I would fall back into the patterns that had defined my first 27 years of life. For the first time in my life, I was about to discover what it felt like to choose myself without apologizing for it. The answer I was about to give would determine whether I remained Anna the perfect daughter and sister, or became Anna the independent woman who finally understood that self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Anna, I'm scared and I need you. Please don't abandon me like this. You're the only person who has ever really understood me." I stared at the message, recognizing the emotional manipulation I had been trained to respond to automatically. This time, instead of feeling guilty, I felt sad that my brother had never learned to manage his emotions independently, sad that my parents had never taught him to value my autonomy, and sad that it had taken me 27 years to recognize that loving someone doesn't require sacrificing yourself for them. I began typing my response, knowing it would either mark the beginning of my family's growth or the end of my relationship with them as I had known it. Either way, I was finally ready to live with the consequences of choosing myself. "Marcus, I love you and I want you to get better. That's why I'm going to trust you to work with the professionals who are trained to help you, rather than enabling your belief that you can only function with my constant support. I'm not abandoning you, I'm believing in your ability to heal and grow. Please get the help you need. I'm rooting for you from here." I pressed send and then turned off my phone, choosing peace over chaos, independence over obligation, and self-respect over family approval. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own oxygen mask on first, trusting that everyone else was capable of putting on their own. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and revelations. My decision to maintain boundaries despite Marcus's crisis triggered a cascade of family reactions that revealed the true nature of our relationships. The first few days brought a barrage of increasingly desperate messages from my parents, each one designed to trigger maximum guilt and urgency. "Anna, Marcus was hospitalized last night," my mother's voice broke on the voicemail. "The doctors say he's having suicidal thoughts. How can you live with yourself knowing your brother might hurt himself because you abandoned him?" The manipulation was so blatant it was almost comical, except for the very real possibility that Marcus was genuinely struggling. I called the hospital directly, identified myself as his sister, and spoke with his attending psychiatrist, Dr. Rodriguez. "Your brother is experiencing a major depressive episode with anxiety," she explained professionally. "He's been asking for you repeatedly, but I want you to know that's very common with patients who have developed unhealthy dependency patterns. Often, the person they're fixated on represents safety and comfort, but continued enabling can actually impede recovery." "Is he really suicidal?" I asked, needing to understand the genuine severity of the situation versus my family's tendency toward dramatic exaggeration. He expressed some passive suicidal ideation, meaning he talked about wishing he were dead but has no active plan or intent to harm himself. "It's concerning and we're taking it seriously, but it's not uncommon in depression. What would be most helpful for his recovery is learning to cope with difficult emotions without relying on specific people to regulate his feelings." The conversation was both reassuring and validating. A mental health professional was confirming what I had suspected, that my constant availability had actually hindered Marcus's development rather than helping it. Dr. Rodriguez recommended that I maintain limited contact while he worked with Marcus on developing independent coping strategies. "Many families struggle with this," she added kindly. "Often the most loving thing you can do is step back and trust the treatment process." I followed her advice, sending Marcus a brief text. "I love you and I'm glad you're getting professional help. I'm rooting for your recovery." I didn't offer to visit, call, or provide the emotional labor he was seeking. For the first time in my adult life, I trusted others to handle a family crisis without my intervention. The response from my parents was swift and vicious. My father called me 15 minutes later, his voice tight with rage. "How dare you send Marcus a text message when he's hospitalized and asking for you? What kind of heartless person are you becoming, Anna?" "I'm becoming someone who trusts mental health professionals to do their job," I replied calmly. Dr. Rodriguez specifically recommended limited contact while Marcus learns to cope independently. "Dr. Rodriguez doesn't know Marcus the way we do," my mother interjected, having joined the call. "She doesn't understand that he needs family support to heal." "Actually, she understands that family support can sometimes become family enabling," I said. "And that's exactly what's happened in our family. We've taught Marcus that he doesn't have to develop coping skills because Anna will always be available to manage his emotions for him." "That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard," my father said. "You're using psychology buzzwords to justify abandoning your brother in his darkest hour." "I'm not abandoning him. I'm finally believing in his ability to heal and grow without me functioning as his emotional crutch." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents alternating between guilt trips, threats, and character assassination. They accused me of being cold, selfish, ungrateful, and fundamentally damaged by my career in social work. "You've gotten so clinical and detached," my mother sobbed. "You've lost your heart, Anna. You've forgotten how to love." But I hadn't forgotten how to love. I was finally learning the difference between love and codependency, between support and enabling, between helping someone and sacrificing yourself to maintain their comfort. Over the following weeks, I maintained my boundaries while staying informed about Marcus's progress through brief conversations with Dr. Rodriguez, whom I had asked to include me in treatment planning with Marcus's permission. He was responding well to medication and therapy, developing coping strategies he had never needed to learn because family members had always managed his emotional regulation for him. "It's actually quite common," Dr. Rodriguez explained during one of our check-ins. "Young adults who have been consistently rescued from emotional discomfort often haven't developed the neural pathways for self-soothing and problem-solving. Your brother is essentially learning skills most people develop in childhood." The conversation made me realize how profoundly my family had failed Marcus by never allowing him to struggle independently. Our constant intervention hadn't protected him, it had left him emotionally stunted and unable to function without external support. Meanwhile, my own life in Washington was flourishing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the constant drain of family crises, I had energy for relationships, hobbies, and personal growth. I joined a book club, started taking weekend photography classes, and began dating a fellow social worker named David who couldn't understand why I had ever doubted my worth. Your family conditioned you to believe that your value depended on self-sacrifice, he observed after I shared some of my history. But that's not love, that's exploitation. Healthy families want their members to thrive individually. Through David's eyes, I began to see just how abnormal my family dynamics had been. He came from a large family where siblings supported each other without sacrificing their own goals, where parents celebrated individual achievements without immediately redirecting attention to whoever needed help, where love wasn't contingent on service. In my family, we help each other, but we also expect each other to develop independence, he explained. If one of my brothers kept calling me to solve problems he could handle himself, my parents would tell him to grow up, not demand that I drop everything to enable his dependency. 6 weeks after Marcus's hospitalization, I received a call from him directly. His voice sounded different, calmer, more grounded, less desperate. "Anna, I wanted to call and apologize," he began. "Dr. Rodriguez has been helping me understand how unfair I've been to you over the years. I never realized how much pressure the family put on you, or how much I took advantage of your willingness to help." I felt tears spring to my eyes, not from sadness but from relief. "Thank you for saying that, Marcus. It means more than you know. I'm learning to manage my anxiety without calling you every time I feel overwhelmed," he continued. "It's hard, but Dr. Rodriguez says that's how I'll actually get better instead of just feeling better temporarily." We talked for 30 minutes, the longest conversation we'd ever had that didn't center on a crisis he needed me to solve. He told me about his therapy sessions, his medication management, and his plans to move into his own apartment rather than living with our parents. For the first time, I was talking to my brother as an equal rather than as his designated emotional caretaker. "I hope I can visit you in DC sometime," he said as our conversation wound down. "I'd like to see your new life, and I promise I won't bring family drama with me." "I'd like that," I replied and meant it. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to spending time with Marcus rather than dreading the emotional labor his presence typically required. My parents, however, remained locked in their old patterns. They continued to call me regularly, not to ask about my life or express interest in my well-being, but to update me on Marcus's progress and hint that my presence would accelerate his recovery. "He's doing better, but he still asks about you," my mother would say during our brief monthly calls. "I think a visit from his sister would really help him feel loved and supported." "He is loved and supported," I would reply. "By his treatment team, by you and Dad, and by me from a distance. His recovery depends on learning that love doesn't require physical presence or constant availability." "You've become so cold, Anna," was my mother's typical response. "I don't recognize the daughter I raised." "Maybe because you never actually knew the daughter you raised," I would answer. "You knew the role I played, but not the person I am." These conversations were painful but necessary. They confirmed that my parents were not yet ready to examine their own contributions to our family dysfunction. They remained invested in seeing me as the problem, the selfish daughter who had abandoned her family, rather than recognizing how their favoritism and emotional manipulation had created an unsustainable dynamic. As my first year in Washington drew to a close, I reflected on the profound changes in my life. I had not only survived my family's crisis without rescuing them, but I had thrived. My work at the National Center was challenging and fulfilling, my relationship with David was healthy and supportive, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt genuine pride in my achievements rather than just relief at having met expectations. Most importantly, I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary for everyone's growth. Marcus was developing independence and resilience he never would have gained if I had continued enabling his dependency. My parents were being forced to confront the reality that they had created an imbalanced family system. And I was finally discovering who I was when I wasn't defined by my utility to others. The journey wasn't over. Family healing would take years, not months, and there was no guarantee that my parents would ever fully acknowledge their role in creating our dysfunctional patterns. But I had learned that I couldn't control their growth, I could only control my own. That realization was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it meant accepting that some relationships might never heal, liberating because it meant I was no longer responsible for managing other people's emotions or carrying the weight of family harmony on my shoulders. The sunrise over Washington, D.C. had never looked more beautiful, and for the first time in my life, I was watching it as someone who belonged to herself.